Hi, David Cohen again. I hope you enjoyed part one. Welcome. In part one of Leading Through the Storm with our guest, Tom Marazzo, we're talking leadership. And if you recall the events in Ottawa, it was a pretty contentious event. Really interesting, lots of dynamics, lots of people to manage, lots of personalities, lots of challenges, lots of obstacles. Managing people like the police, the mayor, our, people in the House of Commons. Well, Tom Marazzo in part two is going to discuss that with us. How to manage in difficult, challenging situations, managing and leading through the storm. So I hope you enjoyed part two. We talk about many issues. And we have a really fascinating chat. And there's some wonderful nuggets too, in terms of how to lead when the going gets tough. You know, it's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, I think we witnessed that. Please enjoy part two and our very candid discussion with Tom Marazzo. Thanks.
Now, we talked a little bit about social media. I felt in my role, I had to be very, very cautious because some people had very, very big social media followings.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't run the risk, or I couldn't run the risk of getting into a big, giant argument with some of the social media darlings because the next thing you know, they would go outside onto the sidewalk and do a TikTok and start criticizing you and attacking you personally, which undermines the entire objective of the convoy. And so this is where, I talk about ego. Ego is really, I think, the number one threat to the success of a mission this important. And so you had to make sure that you weren't hurting people's egos so that they wouldn't turn around and publicize the dirty laundry inside.
Right. And so turn them off the mission too, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it did happen in cases. Some of the social media darlings were outright attacking the leadership or specific members of the convoy leadership. And I wondered why. I just couldn't understand why what were these people's motivations to publicly attack the leadership on whole of the convoy, or specific people associated with the leadership of the convoy. It's like, you're not helping this cause, you're hurting this cause. You're creating a story that now I have to spend half my day counteracting. And it's a distraction from what the mission is. The mission is to end the mandates. But now I have to spend a half a day putting out your fire. There's a well-known lady with a huge following, I think in the Kingston area, and I think her name is the amazing Paulie. And she did a vicious hit piece on a couple of people that really played a much more minor role in the leadership of the convoy. But for days, I was having to deal with the consequences of this lady, and she's got a reputation for doing really good work in highlighting corruption, and she's been at this for about 10 years. But the issue that I take with her is that she wasn't actually in Ottawa. She took a couple of sound bites from an interview and created this entire narrative. And overall, I spent hours having to put this fire out because that wasn't our objective. I wasn't there to deal with her theories, because at that point they were just baseless theories.
Yeah, and we have to make that distinction as viewers of this kind of content.
Yeah,
this alternative content. We have to make the distinction between truth and fiction. And fiction for maybe just for the sake of numbers and views and hits.
Well, and that's what I felt, was that this whole initiative, that this podcast that she had done, from my perspective, the only thing it would do would drive up her viewership at the expense of a group of people that actually went to Ottawa to fight to get the freedoms back of everybody, And she created a massive controversy inside the leadership, where I think could have waited until the end of the convoy where she could have started examining all that stuff. But she did it right in the middle of it and completely derailed everything we were working for.
Yeah.
You know, and I was getting messages from friends of mine that are followers of her. And, you know, her podcast was a massive body blow to the entire effort.
Mm.
And I don't think she ever even gave it a second thought. And I felt that it was entirely inappropriate. It was unreasonable. It was unfair. It was a massive distraction. And it, for me, it came from a place, again, of ego. And it was baseless. And she said in the very beginning, I could only watch the first little while because I was so upset. But, you know, it was in Chris Scott from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Alberta. He actually did a 16-minute live stream about it, and how it was entirely inappropriate for the amazing Paulie to have done that. And it didn't help anybody except maybe increase her viewership. I don't know if it did or not. If I certainly would have unsubscribed after that. But I know from friends of mine that are followers of her, she has done some outstanding work in the past. So I don't want to come, you know, sound like I'm not a fan or that she's a bad person. She's done some great stuff in the past, but in that particular case, she was so far off base and did more damage than she possibly could understand.
So a momentary lack of judgment.
It was a momentary lack of judgment. And I think she should have waited to the end of the convoy and then picked up that piece.
Yeah. And
not in the middle of it.
Right. And she was biting the hand that, you know, that.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed, you know, Tom, was when you spoke, when you led these briefs, you're calm. There's a sensitive demeanor really shone through daily on Facebook and YouTube channels. But what was really happening, were you really navigating some stormy waters, like this example. And this, I might add, for those watching, is a teachable moment on leadership. And ideally, if you're either an entrepreneur or maybe you're a younger individual, the lessons you're going to learn right now will help you navigate your own life and venture, because we're all in stormy waters right now. What and who did you encounter during the 3 weeks in Ottawa? What giants did you have to slay without losing the goal and the mission of the convoy? Because you came across some pretty slippery.
Yeah. Well, like you touched on it, you know, to answer that, you touched on a excuse me, you touched on a few points earlier. And again, it leads to ego as well. But the important thing that you touched on was fact or fiction. And really every day, mostly in the beginning, I'd say for the first week, people would panic. People would come into our headquarters and, you know, I've got to tell you this thing. I've got to, this is important. It can't wait. And every day I would just tell people, stop, take a breath, calm down. We don't have any emergencies. The only people that have emergencies are the police, the ambulances, the firefighters. We don't have any emergencies. We have all the time in the world. So let's just calmly take a breath, think about it. Does it make sense when you say it out loud? And is it really an emergency? You know, and is it really true, or is it an opinion, or is it just a rumor? And obviously, as time went on, we did become more paranoid because of the steps that the police were taking. And so, you know, to get back to your original question, dealing with the police was extremely difficult. When I did my MBA, I focused my electives on negotiation and influence. And also I've done other seminars on negotiating. And you know, the two Ottawa police officers for the liaison team, I have to admit, I did like the guys. There were a couple of guys that I would have loved to have gone for a beer with. I think they'd be just really nice people to hang around with. And there was another, the Ottawa police officer, or sorry, the OPP. His name was Andrew. Great guy. Really, really liked Andrew. Very professional. Really good police officer. And I think all three of them were. But I've studied negotiation for a long time, and I just didn't think that my two Ottawa police officers were
Showing their cards.
well, they were. I don't think they were very good at the negotiating, because I don't, from the way I read it, and I could be totally off base with this, but I always got the sense that they felt like they were negotiating with some, low-level street thug who was, selling something on a corner somewhere. They weren't dealing with, they're not used to like, I just felt that they weren't playing at the level that they should have been playing, and they never adjusted their game. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to these two guys. I just think that they had the wrong perspective on the way we needed to be negotiating. And at one point, in one of the meetings I was in, I just walked out of the meeting, because the lawyers were in the meeting with me, and they said to me after, like, you couldn't have done a more perfect thing than just to walk out and let us have the rest of the conversation. I did respect these officers. I really did, despite what maybe came out later. But I really did feel like their leadership, the police leadership, and the city of Ottawa, the mayor in particular, oftentimes acted in really bad faith. That was really, really frustrating, because we had done a live stream several times where we said, our objective right now is to take the pressure off of the city of Ottawa and its residents, and also take the pressure off the police in Ottawa, and to put the pressure back on who deserves it, which is the federal government. And they just weren't getting it. I don't know what it was, because we had truckers that didn't want to cooperate with the police, because oftentimes a police officer would say to somebody, okay, move your truck because of this safety violation, this safety reason. And the trucker would say, okay, well, I'll move it up over here. And then the officer would park his car or his cruiser right in that spot. And so after, they would continue to do this kind of stuff and trick the truckers into moving out of their position in bad faith. And then after a while, they just lost credibility. The truckers said, you know what, I don't care what you ask me from now on. I'm not moving. I'm not going to play ball. So at one point, we did negotiate a deal to move more trucks up onto Wellington, and the truckers didn't want to do it. They were like, no, this is a trick. This is a trap. I'm like, no, I've been dealing with the city manager and the police, and this is a good thing for us. And the truckers outright refused. Right. And then finally, after 3 days of trying, we got the truckers prepared to move. We had to get the police to move the barriers. So the police started moving the barriers. The truckers were going to move up to Wellington even further. The public didn't know what was going on, and the public that were there actually intervened and thought that the police were coming in to attack the truckers. So the public actually got in between the police and the trucks.
Yes.
Because the behavior of the police all that time, we lost the trust of the police, or we stopped trusting the police. And so, moments like that were really, really challenging, because the police, and then, a statement went out in the media from Tamara, and also a separate statement was from the mayor of Ottawa. And, we didn't agree to anything. We just said that we would agree to talk. And an hour before we went into the meeting with the city manager and a police inspector, in their chief safety person for the city, an hour before we were going into the meeting, the mayor had given out these letters to the media and was running around town doing a victory lap, that he had single-handedly slain the beast in his city, and that the truckers were going to leave. you know, and we're walking into this meeting and we're getting texts like crazy going, what's going on? Have you sold us out? Are we leaving? You know, what, it's like, guys, I'm going into a meeting right now and I can't bring my cell phone. I can't even respond, you know. So the timing of this was very well planned. I mean, the city played us. Um, and it was really unfortunate. And, you know, nobody ever met with the mayor. To my knowledge, I never met the mayor, or I don't think anyone else ever met the mayor. It was always done through intermediaries.
Yeah.
Because the mayor didn't want to actually have any sort of in-person contact with any of the leadership of the convoy. So, you know, and then you find out the mayor of Ottawa is not even running again. But he does have long-term political aspirations with the Liberal Party.
Mm.
So really frustrating, really frustrating.
Yeah. And I wonder how fear kind of plays into their decision making, you know, like fear impacts us, right? There's either
Yes.
love or fear.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, somebody doing, you know, decision making based on love versus fear is totally different. How did you think fear impacted? Because to me, that was a mayor that was scared underneath it all.
That's a great point. And I agree with that, because it's not, you know, fear of COVID. It's not fear of, you know, personal injury. I think it's fear of
Reputation.
one's own
Yeah.
reputation and political aspirations. In the city, or the people don't matter, you know, and this is where we talk about ego again. You know, I was extremely disappointed in various members of the Ottawa City Council. You know, Diane Dean was, and I've said this publicly, and I would say it to her face if I could. I would tell her, I think you need a psychological evaluation. I think you need some serious help with your mental health. Please go get some. I'll pay for the first appointment. You know, there was other members on the council that were putting pressure on the mayor. At some point, the mayor removed both Diane Dean and another councillor from the police services board. And then you saw the chief of police himself in Ottawa resigned. I don't think he resigned. I think he was probably given the option, fall on your sword or we're going to kick you out. And then they brought in another police chief, and after 2 days said, nah, I'm not getting in the middle of that storm. And so the deputy police chief was more than eager to get involved and start beating people in his streets. You know, so there was fear, but I don't ever believe that the people in law enforcement or government were physically worried about fear. I think they were just power hungry people. And were more worried about their own political aspirations and their own careers and stuff, and they were going to do anything to advance themselves. You know, as long as they keep their paychecks flowing and get their raises, they don't care about the people under them. And Danny Beaufort and I did a public statement, and Danny spoke after me, and he got up there, and I love Danny. He's an incredibly courageous man, and his wife, you know, by his side in Ottawa almost the entire time. And he got up and made a statement, and he said to the police, he said, you know, this message is for the police. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that I care more about you than your chain of command does. And, you know, his voice got a little bit shaky, but I'll tell you, all of ours did. And if you saw any of the videos, I mean, we had a lot of highly emotional moments. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've said to people, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, if you were not moved to tears, or if you hadn't tasted your own tears while you were involved in Ottawa, you know, I'd be shocked. There's not a person I know that wasn't either moved to tears or were extremely emotional and choked up.
Yeah.
It happened to us all, and it was hard, because when you think about the enormity of what we were there to do.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, and I there was the final press conference that I had done, and if you watched it, you saw I got choked up a few times
Yeah.
because at the point that I was making that statement, my children kept popping into my head. And I think just the lack of sleep, the lack of belief of what was actually happening to Canadian citizens, the level of depths that these people were willing to go, and seeing veterans getting beaten,
Yeah, and Danny got arrested.
and Danny getting arrested, and all
Yeah.
these people. And it was just the pinnacle of sadness. And then really going up, and I was really upset when people said, well, they're surrendering, or they're tucking tail and they're running, or they're quitting, or they're giving up. It's like, no, we made a conscious decision, and I didn't make the decision. The truckers made the decision. Not all of them. Not a lot of them wanted to stay and fight, but the smart, courageous, the true leaders in different on different streets and in different areas, they made the decision to leave. My job was to go there and to pass that message. And I agreed with the message. I felt we should leave at that point.
Mhm.
There was nothing to be gained by becoming a punching bag for a bunch of brown shirts. There was really nothing to be gained by staying. So I announced that we were going to peacefully withdraw. And it was hard to make that announcement. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, because we didn't get what we were there to get. We got other things. We woke up a lot of Canadians to the
Mhm.
fact that our government is not what maybe we thought they were, and a lot of people saw that. But it was a really, really difficult thing. And people asked me, well, why were you the one that went up and did it at the end? I said, because I was the only one that wasn't in jail.
Yeah,
um
true.
y- I think Tamara would have probably been a better person to make that announcement, but it took 3 weeks for them to let her out of prison, or out of incarceration anyway.
Yeah.
Tamara would have been a better person to make that. But Tamara was incarcerated, so was Chris Barber, so was Danny. um
Ah,
and so
Freedom
I would, and
Convoy.
Pat was,
Yeah.
and other people. So I was really the last recognizable face to get up and make that announcement. So that's kind of how, or why I was the one who did it. And I nobody asked me to do it. I just said, 1 o'clock, I'm going to announce that we're going to leave. And everybody went into action and set it all up. And some other events got canceled because I was going to go make that announcement. So one of the toughest moments of my life. I My sister had passed away in 2000, and while I was up there, I felt like I was back giving my sister's eulogy. um and that was 22 years ago. And a lot of emotion kind of showed up at the podium at that time. And I read off that story right in the beginning from the lady who posted it about the truckers. And then at the end, when they were coming for me, there was no one left.
Mhm.
Like, even now, I just say that and I think about it, and it does choke me up a little bit, because it's true. If we don't do this, if we and I realized something last night in this radio show I was doing with these great guys in Philadelphia, that it's not about taking back our country, it's taking back our politics. That's what we are fighting for, to get back political control of our country.
Hope you enjoyed part two. Coming up in part three, Tom makes some major announcements that he's going to be running in the provincial election in June for the Ontario Party with Derek Sloan, and also some other major announcements as well, because it's important to not only appreciate what went on in Ottawa over those 3.5 weeks, but what's the direction now. I believe that you know, we all as Canadians need to be mindful and aware and vigilant and ask questions about what's going on in our country so that we begin to heal and we begin to grow together. So please enjoy these videos that we're bringing to you. I hope you you did enjoy part 2. Part 3 is a little bit shorter, just giving you the heads up. And we'll be back in part 3, introducing that video for you. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying and getting some really good information about what it takes to lead others through the storm. Enjoy.